Hello everybody and welcome to another Alternative Interactions. I'm Gary. Well, today we've got an interesting one where we're going to be talking briefly about the Titanic and if the Titanic really did actually sink and what led up to the sinking of the Titanic. I've covered this before previously, I think with Richard in Rocking Pandora's Box. But I have had comments asking a little bit more about that and what I think, and so I've never really looked into the Titanic too much. I know there's a very good book out there. Many years ago, when I was having a property renovated, the plasterer had actually read a book questioning whether the Titanic had actually ever sunk. It didn't go into the banking side of things and how it had affected the world thereafter. Kind of a pivotal point really in history, but it did question very much so whether the Titanic ever actually sunk, and was it its sister ship, the Olympic. I can't remember that book, but it was that was probably around 2016-17 when this guy was talking to me about that book. So clearly there is some interesting literature out there and questioning of narrative, which is very interesting. So let's beginning a little story, shall we? Obviously this is for entertainment purposes, and we know that none of what I'm saying is true. So the story really starts with a group of bankers that had a meeting on Jekyll Island. And again, there's another book called, I think, The Creature from Jekyll Island. And this happened, I think, in about 1910, this meeting. This meeting was really brought upon by the bankers. And I think we know who the bankers were. But fundamentally, JP Morgan and such like were highly involved in this, as well as probably the Rothschilds and whoever. I can't fully remember, but I know JP Morgan was key to this, a lot of this. And JP Morgan will come up again, very much so. So in 1907, due to the fact that the bankers were gambling with finances and the American economy, America kind of went through a little pop, and basically JP Morgan had to bail out America from their own dodgy dealings within the American financial system. So in 1907, JP Morgan was forced to bail out the American government out of his own pocket. Clearly the bankers couldn't have that. Imagine having to bail yourself out of your own misfortune and your own greed. I mean, shocking. That could never happen. So there was a meeting on Jekyll Island in the USA in 1910 where lots of prominent bankers, we could also maybe call them Zionists, the current Zionists, or the Khazarian mafia in banking, had a meeting. And like I say, there's a book out about that. I think, as I say, I've mentioned it before, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I haven't read it, but it's been pointed out to me by Minako64. That's a guy called Mario who has his own YouTube channel on financial bits and pieces. Well worth watching. He comes up with some very good historical nuggets, to say the least. And he's a strong advocate for gold and silver, and no, this is no way financial advice, because obviously nobody is qualified to give financial advice. I would certainly be making sure that I had some silver coins of the realm, and if you could have some gold, it would be of benefit potentially if there was some kind of revaluing or collapse. Many analysts are currently looking at gold and silver, particularly silver, as being the best potential investment that was of a generation, if not ever, because it's about to fly, apparently, allegedly. And again, this is not financial advice, and this is all part of the story that we're telling, isn't it? So the meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910 was basically that the bankers needed to create a situation where they could gamble with a nation's money, but when it went pop, the nation would bail out their gambling so that they would keep all the money they made from their ill-gotten gains while gambling with the nation's money. The nation's taxpayers would then pay tax to cover their gambling debts as such, and then they would be free to do it all over again. Welcome to fractional reserve banking. So obviously the meeting on Jekyll Island happened, and plans were made. Now, serendipity, fate, whatever you call it, always comes in. Now, it's my understanding that pre the Titanic sailing for its maiden voyage, the Olympic, its sister ship, had a major boiler fire. And my understanding is that the insurance companies refused to cover that damage within the ship. Now, obviously, a banker such as JP Morgan, who owned that ship and the Titanic, could not be out of pocket. He'd already been out of pocket in 1907, so he wasn't about to lose a very valuable ship commodity. And so a plan was hatched that would facilitate the Jekyll Island plan that they had come up with. Now, there was 3 flies in the ointment of their financial skullduggery, and that was John Jacob Astor, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim. And these 3 bankers or billionaires, multi-millionaires, they would certainly be billionaires in their own rights this day if they'd never even done anything, so that's how rich they were, could see the writing on the wall for the American public and the banking industry should the plans from Jekyll Island go ahead and JP Morgan and co get the stranglehold on the USA that they wanted. And so they opposed the plans on Jekyll Island that had come up. Now, as we go back to the Olympic, we have a ship that looks identical in every way, fundamentally, to the untrained eye. I think there's literally 1 or 2 tiny changes of the design of the both ships, and I think it's high up and on the windows. I think one's got like 8 windows and one's got 6 windows, or something very minor like that from memory. But I could not tell the difference between both ships just by a casual glance. That was pointed out to me. So we have fundamentally 2 identical ships. One has been damaged and the insurance company won't pay out, and it's going to cost a lot of money to fix. And one is a brand spanking new one that is going on to its maiden voyage. Now, for entertainment purposes only, I think that a plot was made and a plan hatched where 3 people who were a fly in the ointment, Astor, Guggenheim and Strauss, could be potentially eliminated due to a disaster. And so it would appear, and again this is conjecture, but it seems to have some legs, that one weekend when both ships were next to each other in the dry dock, in the dock area, that the internals, cutlery and such like, were swapped over the course of a weekend. Now, I have seen evidence of overtime logs for the weekend suggesting that it happened, which means nothing particularly. But as you know, I do like a little side piece of, that's very interesting. Now, in the UK, we have a programme called the Antiques Roadshow, and I'm sure across the world there is a offshoot of it everywhere. Now, the Antiques Roadshow is where people bring in antiques or old items or odd, strange items, and an expert values them, and very pleasant, thank you very much. Now, I haven't watched TV for many, many years, but I do remember this, and it could have been 4 or 5 years ago now, I don't know. But the Antiques Roadshow popped up, and it's something I'm happy to watch because it's mundane, and you might actually learn something about something that comes up on there, so you know. So I started watching this particular program, Antiques Roadshow, and a gentleman from Liverpool turned up with a full set of Titanic cutlery, as in there was cutlery, plates, like a mini dinner service, not a full service. I think from memory there's about 4 plates, for this, for that, for everything, but there was 4 of, so it would have been enough so that 4, it could have even been 6, but it wasn't very big. It was certainly 3 or 4, 5, 6 from memory, and it was Titanic crockery and cutlery, pristine. Now, according to the records, there were no spares of cutlery, or certainly the crockery, cups and saucers and such like, from the Titanic, and all of that went down with the Titanic when it sunk. But here we have genuine Titanic cutlery, well, crockery, we'll use the word crockery, dinner plate service sets or whatever it is, there in front of the guy. And it turned out that his relative worked at the docks in Liverpool and was probably most likely one of the people who swapped the interior over in the Titanic. Now, I'm not disparaging Liverpudlians in any way, shape or form, but certain Liverpudlians are, let's put it this way, partial to some 5-finger discount. And if you could have a cutlery, a set of plates and such like for your family when money's very tight, and get away with it, why not? And I believe that's what happened. So the expert was kind of bemused and like, well, he literally said, well, the only plates and saucers from the Titanic are actually at the bottom of the sea, so how did he get this? And there's like a we don't know. So that's just a very interesting side note that kind of links into the overtime and the fact that we now have artifacts that are misplaced in time and not at the bottom of the ocean. So obviously I believe the Titanic was actually the Olympic, and the Olympic set sail with these 3 rich bankers on. Now, JP Morgan was due to sail with these people, but it's understood about half an hour, 20 minutes before the Titanic or the Olympic set sail, he jumped off the ship, departed, and left these bankers on there. And so we'll call it the Olympic now, set sail and sailed out from, I think its last destination was Ireland, and I can't think of the port now, my brain's gone dead, but they left from Ireland. I think they went from Southampton from memory to Ireland, and then from Ireland or from Liverpool to there. So that's what they did. Now, the Olympic sailed and apparently hit an iceberg and sank. Now, that's very interesting when it was an unsinkable ship. But if you can cast your minds back a while ago when we had the sub that exploded or was destroyed while they were doing tours of the Titanic, which has now stopped, I think, all sub tours to the Titanic. But they produce some very interesting photographs. If you hit an iceberg on a hull, you'd expect the hull to have gone in. So the camera's just put some extra light, so you'd expect the hull to go in, or there to be a tear, so the water could rush in behind this. But what they actually photographed, sorry, the camera's playing up a bit. What they actually photographed was the hull sprayed out like it had been an explosion. A boiler explosion, in fact. So it looked like, from the photographs, that there had been an explosion. The metal is peeled open, which would have caused the sinking of the Titanic. Or the Olympic, actually, because the Olympic was the one that had the boiler problems, which is very, very interesting. So that kind of explains the how it sunk, not the iceberg. Now, there were hundreds of people who lost their life on the Titanic. Now, I remember seeing this several years ago, and this is from my memory. I haven't looked it up since, but this is from my grey matter. Now, we had first class, second class and third class. The majority of the deaths, and somebody had broken down the deaths of each class, which was very interesting. It could have been from this book in 2017 that I was told about. So again, now the majority of the deaths came from third class, and that's because the third class people were locked inside the Titanic when it sunk. They were given no chance of escape. There were not enough lifeboats, and a decision was made that third class people were not wanted or to be given the chance of life. We then have second class, where we have significantly less deaths, but there were deaths. We then come to the first class. Now, despite the propaganda of women and children first, it was actually first class first, and then women and children after. So the entirety of the first class of the Olympic or Titanic were given priority over the lifeboats. From memory, only 4 people out of the entirety of first class died on the Titanic. I repeat that, 4 people died from first class. Now, I'm not sure how many people were on first class. I didn't Google it before I started, but if you wanted to, you could. I would imagine there was 100, 150, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe 75, 80, but certainly a good number. Now, isn't it amazing that out of the 4 deaths on first class, 3 of them happened to be the world's richest bankers who opposed the plans of Jekyll Island and the beginning of the Federal Reserve. That is a very, very, very big coincidence. I'd hate to do the calculations on that. And I think the 4th person that died on the Titanic was actually a relative of one of those 3 bankers, of either Astor, Strauss or Guggenheim. So it could have been one of the wives of. And we get the story that the captain of the ship shot himself and went down with the ship. I wonder how much the captain's family got paid and looked after the sinking of the Titanic stroke Olympic. And I wonder if these people weren't suicided. That's supposition, I don't know, but it feels right to me as what happened. So the Olympic was scuppered at sea, blowing up. The bankers had been executed already, and the sinking of that ship that was renamed the Titanic, but the Olympic, was used to hide the fact that these 3 bankers were murdered by JP Morgan and Co. of the Jekyll Island Association. And it's a very, very big coincidence as well that some months later, in the December, so the Titanic sunk in April 2013, and 23rd of December 2013 the Federal Reserve was created and signed in. My understanding is that the Federal Reserve didn't actually go through Congress as such, or the Senate in America. Now, whether the Americans here watching this, or somebody who could do more research on that one, can confirm that, I'm not sure, but that is my understanding of that event. It's also, I have seen documentation saying that the President of America at the time, who signed the Federal Reserve Act in, said that that was his greatest regret of his entire life, because he fundamentally signed America into debt slavery of the banking cabal, and JP Morgan was one of the leading lights of that cabal. We also know that JP Morgan in recent years was given a $1 billion fine for market manipulation of gold, and specifically silver. However, no, I tell you wrong there. I do apologise. He was given a £920 million fine, but had made $1 billion in profits. So, for the market manipulation of silver and keeping the price artificially low, he made £80 million profit and paid a small fine, and then was rewarded by given the status of being able to have the vault control of gold and silver within the United States. The company, obviously JP Morgan's past now, but I think you can see how the corruption of and the creation of the Federal Reserve via the sinking of the Olympic, not the Titanic, happened. And I would say that JP Morgan was able also to claim a very, very big amount of money for the Titanic sinking, when in actual fact it was the Olympic which had previously had the insurer's refusal of payment for that. So there we go. That's a very brief overview of the Titanic. I'm sure others who have looked into the Titanic far more deeply than I have will have far more facts and such like in the comments section. Please do so. Please like, share and subscribe on my channel. I also have a Telegram account of the same name, Alternative Interactions, so please do watch that, and thank you very much for listening, and hopefully that's been clear enough so you can see the potential skullduggery of the sinking of the Titanic, even though it wasn't. And I know in a previous chat with Richard, I referred to it as the Titanic. I'm fully aware it was not the Titanic, but obviously we have to we have time constraints on our Rocking Pandora's Box. We try to keep it to 35 to 40 minutes every time. So obviously we can't go too deeply into certain subjects, and this is a brief overview, and it's even taken me 25 minutes or so to do so. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for all the sharing, subscribing you've done, and a big thank you because I am getting very close to 500 subs now, and I really appreciate it. And thank you very much for the member who said and wrote down 500 subs soon. Thank you very much for putting that positive spell out there, and I appreciate all your comments, likes, shares and subscribes. I really am blessed. So thank you very much, everybody, and goodbye. Thank you.